What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to the Right Mindset. Today, we are going to go over what alpha readers are and how alpha readers can look at your writing before it's polished. Very important. Not published, polished. I know it's common for writers to jump right to asking beta readers to give their polished work a quick gander, but what's the benefit of an alpha reader's involvement looking at a rough draft? Let's help develop that right mindset. You know what I'm saying? Here, click the end run. Oh yeah, today's lesson is about alpha readers, and if you're new here, or you've been watching for quite some time and you're enjoying the content, please subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't miss out. All right. Let's just get right into it, shall we? What is the difference between an alpha reader, and a beta reader? And I know you're thinking, well, alpha comes before the beta. That is true. But what is the difference? What is their job responsibilities? I'm going to jump into it. What is the difference between an alpha reader and a beta reader? Alpha readers, in general, are reader writers, preferably, who will read your rough manuscript. By rough, I mean it doesn't have to be polished and is usually your second or third draft. Once they read it, they give you feedback based on certain criteria. Alpha readers need to be familiar with the writing process, structure, narrative foundation, etc. Um, do they have to be reader writers? Not necessarily. It just helps because they're used to the process. They're used to narration, structure, not necessarily grammar, not necessarily spelling words correctly, but more or less understanding, the flow of things. Obviously, it would benefit you if somebody reading your book is going, your first act feels more like second act, or I don't feel you really explored the ordinary world. We kind of just jumped into it, which is fine. So I guess the inciting incident started off, but uh, I don't feel like it's leading to anything, or whatever the case may be. They need to understand the process. Whereas with a beta reader, who are traditionally the next stage of the writing process after you rewrite your book based on the alpha reader's notes, beta readers, these are people who read your manuscript after it's been touched up. Basically, take the alpha reader notes, clean up the mistakes, and then give it to your beta readers. Now, beta readers are usually, but again, not always, but usually closer to readers who love the genre your book is in, and less about them being writers. They can be writers, but they should at least also love the genre. If it's an epic fantasy, don't let someone who only reads romantic comedies be a beta reader. They might not understand the genre. Both are extremely helpful, by the way, but have very specific and different requirements for results dedicated to their purpose. Beta readers are there to provide an in-depth evaluation of the almost completed novel in a way that gives an insight from an audience perspective, whereas alpha readers are going to work through the first or second draft with you to provide more of a critique rather than an audience perception, a critique on the writing style. So that's good to know. How do we simplify that? Beta readers are basically fans of the genre and know what they like and really can tell you if the story is working or not working. Who are the characters? Alpha readers are really saying, is the structure working? Are you following the formulas? Are you missing things that are important? Are you earning the rights to the results, or are things just happening? Like as I always say, there's a lot of things happening, but nothing is happening, right? An alpha reader really would tell you that. What should an alpha reader do? All right, well, here we go. Alpha readers are there as professional experts in your field. Okay, maybe you don't have lots of close friends or people around your circle of influence who are both professionals and or experts in your field. P.S. This is why you build relationships with other fellow writers so you can grow together. That's all right. When you're all pros and experts in your fields as you develop, your circle of influence will benefit from it as a group. And remember, a circle of influence are not a group of people who can influence your career. They're people that influence better and stronger habits, so you can develop a career by doing what's right. Starting with you. It's not about other people in that essence. You need to know what you're doing, and you need to have good habits. All right. Back to what should an alpha reader do? Well, here we go. They are not there for spelling errors, commas, even grammar, though they can give you insight to it. That's not technically their job in this instance. Their job is to look at the bigger picture of what the overall narrative is and how it is or isn't working. They look for what's working, ultimately pointing out what is weak about a plot or a main plot, any plot holes, maybe character flaws, maybe inconsistencies in character choices, and undeveloped through lines. They might look at your piece and say, are the themes coming through? You would ask them, what are the themes you see? And they're like, I see this, this, and this. And you're like, oh, that's not the theme. And then you explain, and they're like, oh, yeah, that theme is nowhere near to be found, These alpha readers are making sure you earn moments and not necessarily allowing things to happen just because you want them to happen. They are helpful with pacing. Basically, is the world building taking away from character growth, or is character growth farly outweighing world building? Is there not enough world building? Things like that. The character growth taking away from the narrative is important to figure out, because, are we just having character moments, or are we allowing the narrative to grow through character moments? Basically, is it all exposition, or are things really happening? Things you should remember about alpha readers. First, always be hydrated. The rare instance where I'm drinking water instead of soda. All right. Pepsi sponsor me. All right. Just kidding. Alpha readers should be working with you to provide feedback without being rude or overly critical of the story. That's true. There's a difference between this sucks, I don't really see how this story is ever going to come together, versus, hey, I'm not really liking what I'm reading. It doesn't make sense. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This, and this needs a little bit of work. Have you thought about really challenging this moment a little bit more, etc.? A strong alpha reader doesn't try pressuring you into taking your story in a different direction or to write the story they see in their head. They should challenge you and make you question what you have and where it's going. But that doesn't mean they're challenging you in a way where they say, I know you want to write a story about dinosaurs, but wouldn't it be cooler if the dinosaurs were actually horses? Okay. They should also know how to work with you to find what works better when something is not working at all, meaning they understand you and there's a nice shorthand between you both. But in the end, it's your story, not theirs. I would say a stronger alpha reader doesn't try pressuring you into taking your story in a different direction or to write the story they see. However, it is important to know that your alpha reader should be able to tell you when the story you're trying to write is not necessarily working, or where you're not challenging your characters enough, which could change the way the story works itself out. But they shouldn't be trying to change the outcome at all. If the story is a character's trying to become a successful banker, right? And the first moment, the ordinary world is that they're in college, but the inciting incident is that they end up meeting. They have a meeting with a boss, like one of the higher ups, and it goes great. However, they walk out, and they're heading to their car, and they have a really nice moment with another person, and that turns into the love interest, who ends up being related to that person. That's pretty interesting. There's the challenge, right? But if I was an alpha reader and I go, hey, let's say it originally was they just go in, they meet the person, it's really great, and then they go out to their car and they go home. My job as an alpha reader would be going, that was too easy. We're not seeing any challenge or choices. Maybe in the interview, there should be a moment where it's questionable. Maybe they have trouble getting to the interview. Maybe the interview is great, but leaving the interview, something else happens. Well, what is that something else? Well, then that would lead to the discovery of maybe they meet somebody in the parking lot, and that somebody ends up being related to the boss, which turns into a subplot, which could turn into a romantic thing. Maybe they end up meeting the rival, which is the person who was also going in for the job, but they learn that person is someone they grew up in school with. So it's moments like that when we go, how do we everything's just happening too easily, too quickly, and there's not enough options for choice making and not enough pushback for challenge. And then that's how you make a stronger story. That's an alpha's job. Is they still need to become a banker, they still need to work that way, but that would change the story if it turns out they meet a rival from their college years or high school, or their college would make more sense, and they're both trying for the same job. It would make more, it would change the story if it turns into be somebody who has a romantic potential. It would change the story greatly if they get into a car accident on their way home, and the phone rings and they get a voice message, and it's that they have the job, but they have to start in 2 weeks. But now they're in the hospital, right? That all changes the story in the sense of how we get to different points, but them becoming the banker still has to happen. And an alpha reader will be able to say, hey, we need to challenge things and add a little bit more value to the story, but they'll still maintain the path to the end results, right? Because they still have, they can't be like, well, I got into a car accident, I can't get to the job, I don't get the job, so now I have to do something else. Like, that's not the story you were writing. But putting a little bit in their way is good for alpha readers to push back on you, right? Things to remember, which means that your alpha readers should be capable of providing the type of feedback you ask for. Again, you don't want an alpha reader. You don't want an alpha reader to basically change your story, but you want them to be able to provide feedback. For example, they should ask questions and give in-depth examples to your own questions instead of just yes or no answers. You are working with them to help you get an insight into the story, not to hear them say, I like this or I don't like this. That's not helpful. You're better off just wearing a beard and sunglasses and reading your own book into the mirror as if you're someone else. Because if your alpha reader is just there to go, I like it, I don't like it, or hey, this was great, hey, keep doing what you're doing, you're not learning anything. Well, why is it good? Why yes? Why no? A good alpha reader needs to give pure feedback, even when it's positive. Oh, this is really working out. I love that this is happening because if we do the banker thing, I like that they get a victory. Their victory is the inciting incident that they get to have a meeting with somebody of note. And I like that because it allows the character to feel capable and that this is the right choice that they made. This is this path, this career path is what they were meant to do because it feels easy. And now that they have it in their sights, let's challenge that. And I like that you do challenge that because it's not that it's easy per se for them, but they have the rival. And it's good because that's a fun element in a story. Because it proves that not only are they capable, but they know what they're doing, and they're not fearful of the pushback, that they're going to continue moving forward, and they are sure of themselves. And a little challenge is not going to corrupt this character. So that's giving good feedback, right? To the yes element. The no element would be what I said earlier, where it's like, hey, you got to add a little bit pushback, right? Another helpful point to know is that a solid alpha reader, I mean, we're all solid, but a good alpha reader understands that they are helping with a book that is not fully polished and refined. They don't judge the book by its cover, as they would say, uh, especially because there is no book cover. Think of it this way: their job is not to look at the book and go, "Oh man, you can't spell," or "No one's going to read this. Your grammar's terrible." Like that's not a good alpha reader. That's not a good person. What they should really be looking for are the elements of the story. Are the elements there? Because again, a great writer has an amazing editor, right? You'll see it all the time in my videos. I can't spell, and sometimes when I'm brainstorming, my grammar's terrible. But when I'm working out pieces, that's when I get to refine it. And even then, I need an editor to look at it. And finally, but not least, things to remember: friends are not alpha readers. If they are your friends, make sure they are alpha readers. Alpha readers should be your friends, but don't have to be. But not all friends are alpha readers. And how do you know the difference? Well, ask yourself this: are they writers? Are they readers? Are they people that are in the industry? Do they understand narrative purpose? Do they follow the rules of what an alpha reader should be? If they do and you are friends with them, then great. But just because they are your friends doesn't qualify them to be alpha readers. That's important. Now, here's something that would help you. Here's example questions you should be asking your alpha readers to help you best get the most out of the experience. First and foremost, before I give some questions, I want you to know you probably want these examples because who doesn't? All right. I don't know. Okay. Some things that I'm going to say to preference these questions is you might not want to talk about your story with the alpha reader. You want them to go in pretty much cold. The reason is the more you tell them, the more they're going to have as a bias a view into it. They might be looking for that now. And you don't want them to be looking for what you think the story is. You want them to be looking for the story in general and how they perceive the story and what's going on in their mind, because you could influence the way they perceive the story based on what you say, and that you might not get the most out of it. And that brings us to question one as an example. What is the main plot? If you explain to them what the main plot is for you in your mind of why you write the story, they might be looking for that, or they might justify it in certain things, and therefore they'll be like, yeah, the main plot's there. Allow them to really kind of give that energy. And the thing is, once they're done reading the book, you could go back and be like, this is what the book is. These are the stories. And now you can ask other questions. Now you could go back to that. Did you see this as the main plot? Does this main plot that I feel I wrote the book based on stand out? And they might go, you know what? That does. I do see that main plot. I was seeing it originally as this, but those elements are definitely there. I didn't realize that was the main plot, maybe because I connected more with this element. But now that you mentioned that that's the main plot, yeah. Or they might say, you know what? These things were standing out way more and filter through to the end of the book. Whereas I feel like that thing that you're talking about was concluded mid act, or midpoint, or maybe by the time you get to the third act, the beginning of the third act, I feel like that was resolved. So if it's resolved before the end of the book, it might not be the main plot. And that's why it's good to allow your alpha reader to go in blind or cold, and then have that discussion after the book is done and they already gave their answers. So you could always go back and reevaluate the questions. Okay. Are there subplots that are taking away from the main plot? Literally the example I just gave where they read it and they go, oh, that you think that's the main plot? See, I was feeling this subplot. You kind of resolve the main plot, early. All right. What is your favorite subplot and why? It's good to get why. Now, as you notice, are there subplots that are taking away from the main plot? That's a yes or no. If they're a good alpha reader, they'll explain why. So that's why now I'm starting to add the and why element to the questions. So you realize, oh, okay, I need to prompt the why. So are there subplots that are taking away from the main plot? And why? Okay, what is your favorite subplot? And why? Does anything feel short, unnecessary, or undeveloped? And why? What part of the book is your favorite? And why? What part of the book is your least favorite? Everyone? And why? Okay. All right. Is the dialogue between characters natural, flowing, and realistic? And why? What is your insight to characters A, B, and C, and so forth and so forth? And are they undeveloped, fleshed out, or lacking? And why? Okay. And then finally, did the payoffs pay off? If yes or no, why? All right. Now I'm gonna give two question examples for Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. All right. Act 1 questions you should be asking. These are just examples. You could definitely work off of them. You don't even have to use them. They're just questions that I have used in the past. Okay. What questions do you have about the story ahead, the ordinary world, and the characters up till page number X? The reason is because how big is Act 1? Where do you feel Act 1 ends? You want them to in that area. What questions do you have about the story ahead, the ordinary world, and the characters up till page blank, blank, blank? Why do we want to ask this question to our alpha readers? We're basically saying, what have you read that's making you think? What hasn't necessarily been answered? What has presented itself that's gotten you a little bit interested? Going, I want, because by answering this, you might learn that you presented something that doesn't necessarily pay off later. Like maybe a character or an item or a historical fact or something about the world itself, and it just doesn't pay off. And like, oh, kind of like would have liked to learn a little bit more about that. And you say, And then if enough alpha readers mention that, because you definitely should have more than one alpha reader, if enough alpha readers mention that, that may be something to think about kind of putting into the story, not as a focal point. Uh, oh, puppy, he's sleeping. He moved from over there to over there. All right. But that's important to know. Like if they're coming up with questions just based on reading the first act, like, oh, I like this, or that was interesting, and I kind of want to know a little bit more about that thing, right? But that also comes to the ordinary world. What questions do you have about the ordinary world? It doesn't make sense, like you ask me questions, Alpha Rita, of what you want to know about the ordinary world to get me thinking. And the characters up to page number X. Right? If the alpha readers don't have questions about your characters, there's a couple things going on. Either A, they're not interesting enough. B, you didn't present any narrative growth or potential for growth. Or C, your characters are boring. It happens. The second question is, do you understand the character's decisions and motivations, and what do you feel they are? All right. And that's important because Act 1 is where you have to introduce the motivations. You have to introduce the characters. You have to, everything that makes the characters who they are, the themes and stuff like that have to be there. And if they can't express what they are to you, then you might have to go back and rework it. All right. Act 2 questions. Does the climax of the midpoint feel strong enough, or does it fall short, and why? Why is that an important question? One of the most common things for writers is saggy Act 2, saggy middle syndrome, or whatever it's called, where you have a really great intro, and maybe the ending is like awesome, but then you're ascending to the climax, the midpoint, and then it's like and then you descend, and and then you get back to Act 3. So it's good to know if the midpoint has been earned, feels strong, or if it fell short. It's good to know those things. Second question for Act 2. At what point during the second act did the story lag or feel rushed, and why? Okay, this has to do with the ascending and descending. Basically, are we just trying to get to the midpoint, or and you're just making things happen, so it's rushed? Uh, uh, are we lagging because we're spending too much time on things? There is a pacing issue, and that's important to know in Act Two. It's very common for Act Two to sort of just be filled with things. All right, 2 questions for Act Three. If you could think back on any expectations you had for this novel, if you could think back on any expectations you had for this novel, A, do you feel satisfied that those expectations were met, and why? And B, are there any expectations that weren't met, and why? Okay, so that's good too. Why are expectations? Because it's what they felt were the story. It's what they felt the story was leading to, and ultimately, did it lead to that, or did it not lead to that? If it did lead to that, was it everything they were hoping for, or was it missing something? If it didn't lead to that, where did it lead? Is really what you're looking for. The second question is: was anything written that made you stop and reflect for a moment, and why? This is good. This question is giving them an overall view of Act 3. Was anything written that made you stop and reflect for a moment? Was the story leading to anything that made you say, "Was this feels weird," or "this feels right," or "I'm kind of glad we got to this point," or "Oh, I love that subplot was resolved here," or "I liked how that subplot." Right? So it's a pretty general question that you could kind of go deeper in. And by the way, any of these questions, you could add your elements to it. They're just the starting point. So it's important to have questions. Um, but again, allow your alpha readers to go uncold. I personally like that. I don't like to give away too much, right? I mean, obviously, if it's the Maven Wars is the name of the book, there's going to be a war that has something to do with a character named Maven. But anyway, all right. Final thoughts. Should you pay your alpha readers? There are 2 routes to this question. You can and you should. If you get strangers or friends, my answer is still the same, of course. You don't have to pay people in cash. You don't have to pay people in cash. No, 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 no. You can pay them in favors, help them when they need help, and introduce them to people. Introductions to people is so powerful. Remember, success is based on making a living within your field of interest. A living is not a lifestyle. A living is affording your average monthly overhead. So how do we find success? We find success by networking, marketing, and practicing. Why? Because networking is who you know, marketing is who knows you, and practicing is about knowing yourself. Networking is a valuable asset, and introducing people to other people is valuable, not only for yourself, but the people that you introduce, because you're building your circle of influence. You're allowing people to meet people within one another, and it's very, very helpful. So that's a great way to pay someone, is through hookups, referrals, especially if there are opportunities to make money. Even when there's no opportunity for you to make money, but you know that your friend who did you this favor would be perfect for that opportunity, and referring them that way too. But again, are they fellow writers? Are the people doing the alpha reading for you fellow writers? Well, great. When you get an interview with someone, help them get the interview on that same show. I always notice when people get interviews, I rarely see the people like in their orbit getting interviews on those shows. Like if you get an interview on something, reach out and try to introduce your people to those people in the interview so they could get interviews, especially if it's a podcast or a writer webzine. Podcasts are a dime a dozen, and they're always looking for people to interview, especially if they're starting out, right? And then, by the way, there's nothing wrong with a starting out podcast. Just saying. You want to help one another, and when in doubt, pizza parties. That's another way to really pay people, is pizza. I mean, for me, Sicilian, from New York, lived in Brooklyn. I like the pizzas. All right. Fun fact: pizza in Italia is pie. So when someone says, "Hey, let's order a pizza pie," they're saying, "Let's order a pie pie." Just putting that. Okay. Maybe that one works only on me, just for the record. But if you want to pay cash money and call it a day, meaning like I don't want to owe any favors, I don't really care about helping the people around me, no judgment. You might want to think of it this way. If the manuscript is about 50,000 words, think of it as $1 per 1,000 words. Okay. If the manuscript is anywhere from 50 to 100,000 words, it's going to be a little bit more work. So think about it as $1.50 per 1,000 words. And if the manuscript is 100,000 words or more, sort of like my fantasy novels, think of it as $2 per 1,000. So what does that work out to? Well, basically a 50,000 word manuscript or story would cost $50 for someone to alpha read. $150 for 100,000 words and $200 for 100,000 words or more, right? In closing, by the way, that's not really a lot of money. You know, if you save $20 a month in 10 months, that covers the cost of an alpha reader, right? If you have 5 alpha readers, then you got to save $100 a month, you know, whatever. If you have a 50,000 word manuscript, it's $50. You get 4 alpha readers for $200. So, you know, you got to think ahead and budget and save and put money aside. Just like with marketing, you can't just be like, I'm going to market on social media. No, you have to have a marketing budget. In closing, alpha readers are a great way into the minds of other writers and readers who see the world as you do, not necessarily the world you wrote, but the world of writing and how narration works. I said that in the beginning, alpha readers are not friends unless those friends are indeed writers who love to read. Remember, just because they're friends does not qualify them to be alpha readers. To get the most out of your alpha readers, you want a mind that understands how to look deeper into narrative, characters, and overall flow of your story. Awesome. Okay, the next video in this series will be a deep dive into beta readers. Why not? I mean, that's literally the next thing, right? We'll think about ways to best utilize a beta reader or beta readers, how to find these readers, and give examples of questions like we did in this video. Speaking of questions, have you ever been an alpha reader for a writer? If so, how was it? And would you do it again? And why? Okay, let me know in the comments below. Oh, by the way, again, if you've been watching my videos and you really like it and you're like, you know what? I want to support this channel. Let me subscribe. Let me like the video. Let me share the video. And if you're new here and you really like this video, subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss out for new stuff. You know, it's really the secret to growing this channel and letting me to do more videos like this, doing more interviews, and ultimately doing live. I'm going to be doing a lot more live videos over the course of the next 12 months, showing you process in real time. Ooh, that's exciting. Anyway, hey, keep developing. What? I wasn't even looking at you. Let me look at you. Let me look at you. There it is. All right. As always, keep developing the right mindset. And I'll see you next time. Love you all. Bye. Ciao, Bella. Au revoir.